right, hello everybody. This is a little bit different than my normal activities. I came to this as an artist, but I was I was asked to, if there might be something that would be a reasonable thing to put on for an opening of the Baton Rouge Entrepreneurship Week. This was in 2017, so it's 2 years ago. The reason I'm presenting it now is because we did a couple things that were sort of innovative in it that I hadn't seen done since. So I thought, let's bring it here and see what happens. See what you think. So what is Brew? It's basically an economic development tool. Entrepreneurship Week, people come, they talk about entrepreneurship, get training, they try to get funding, they meet other companies and angel investors and that kind of thing. This, I think, will basically sum things up, right? It's the big check. So essentially, this was actually this last year. This is the sort of event, it's very corporate, and really needs visibility, right? So it's ultimately about getting people in there so they can make connections and then encourage entrepreneurial activities around Louisiana. So as part of this, every year there's an opening event, which is basically mingling, connecting, and drinking. And it's the sort of thing that is just supposed to loosen people up for the rest of the conference and get them kind of excited about it. So with that, there are some sort of corporate goals that went along with this project, right? One, to engage people, two, to excite people, and three, to connect people. And this is exactly the business-oriented kind of aspect that it went. So basically, about 3 weeks before the event, I and Derick Ostrenko, who's a digital artist there at LSU, were asked if there might be something that would be interesting, that would fill these gaps, that could be at this opening event. So with it, we had a few constraints. One, that it should just be an entrance, then it'd be the transition into the opening event. That would be engaging but brief, because they want people to be connecting and not playing with our stuff, right? That it would recede into the background, and since there's going to be music playing at the event, that whatever we did sound-wise, which is my field, would need to either work with it or stay out of the way. And then that there should be some sort of wow factor, and that's a quote. So we needed a wow factor. And then also, as I mentioned, there we go. We had 2 weeks, right? 3 weeks from when they asked, 2 weeks from when they approved it, and so it was going to happen really quickly. So the main thing was that I was thinking about at this point was how to make this worthwhile, right? Didn't have to do it, but if I did do it, I'd want to make it something that was interesting to me. At the time, I was working in a number of different things. One was this hybrid world stuff, like getting virtual world stuff mapped onto real world things and trying to create these sort of interactive experiences that are kind of shocking because of that. Working with the idea of personal and private things, like personal cell phones, right? It's your mind downloaded onto this thing and your connection out to these other social networks and stuff. And then the idea that they're balancing that against the social or the corporate as a whole. So I think that those are very interesting things, and I think that when you reach from one to the other, then it's kind of a shocking sort of thing. So, and then the last one was the distributed performance system. So trying to get things out into cell phones, into projection, into whatever, just ways of getting this information back and forth. Some of the things that kind of led up to it, the traversal, I mentioned this earlier, was one where we were connecting things that were either MIDI controllable or not, to cell phones, to Second Life, that sort of stuff, and then doing performances of it. Lamar's was another VR thing. And another one was this Flicker Getter, which is kind of an experience that was in cave environment. We did it all in a virtual world in Second Life and Blue Mars, 2 different ones. But then we also did it in 2 cave environments. This one was in Mumbai, where people could come up to it and there was a touch screen, you could play with that, or you could just pull up your own cell phone and start doing searches through Flickr, through tags, and then they would all res and create music and sound, and there was this big visualization thing. It's kind of fun. But it was kind of interesting because it was able to be done on your device, right? Which was quite cool. Oops. And then one last one, my own, a work that I did with John Philwalk and Mike Pounds, where this was sort of an interesting one. I worked with Michael Pounds on an audio installation called Displaced Resonance, which was these sounds that he had recorded on a trip to Japan that were played through PVC pipes. And they were kind of interesting sounds, and they resonated at different lengths, right? And we hooked up infrared trackers or infrared proximity sensors to detect when somebody was in front of it and then activate the sounds. Well, about a year later, we worked with John Philwalk, who's a visual artist, and we made a virtual version of it entirely in Second Life, where it could do things like things would float, lights would change, all that sort of stuff. So about a year later after that, we made this version, which is back in the real world, and we did video tracking with infrared lights. And so each of these boxes has color things. So when you walked up to it, it would actually change the lighting of it, detect you were there, play these sounds back, and you could interact with it just like it had been in the virtual space. And it actually connected with the one that was in Second Life too. So you had these kind of ghosting effects of people walking through it virtually versus real. And then one last thing that inspired me at the time was I'd come across this piece by Ryuichi Kurokawa, which used lasers. And what was really interesting about this was that the lasers he shot onto the projection screen and had the video and the lasers timed and aligned perfectly so that anytime it hit it, visual events would happen along with wavefield synthesis sound effects and that sort of thing. And so it had this great translation of things between this very physical space and these visceral sounds and visuals into, yeah, it was quite remarkable. So with that, we developed a couple of artistic goals, and one was to take a personal experience and on a private device, so people's cell phones, make it public, make it connected, and make it identifiable. And yes, this is very problematic, but it's also interesting because it's problematic, so we can talk about that later. So what we're looking to do was basically, as people came into this event, have them pull out their cell phones, do something, and have it affect everything, right? So the technical things was I needed to be able to ID an individual to play sounds on their device. Because I was interested in the lasers, I thought we'd do a laser projector and actually be able to shoot them with a laser whenever something happened on their device. And then track them individually, yeah, shoot them with a laser. So then I had personal goals, and that was to get a laser projector. So that was my goal. But this actually caused a problem because we only had 2 weeks. We proposed it and then started looking into what it was going to do and how to get it done. And our problem ended up being that in the US, the FDA has to approve any usage of lasers, and it takes months to get approval. I had 2 weeks, wasn't going to happen. At any rate, so we had to swap it out and just do projection onto people as opposed to shooting them with lasers. Oh well. So our original site was this. So this is the space. It was going to be the entrance. This thing, this round wall was where we were going to project a large display. They would come in, they would get entrance, they'd get their packet stuff, they'd pull open their phones, do their thing. We would track them from here and project on them, and then they would go into the space. So like with every business thing, the event changed, and so we got moved. And so then basically the week that we set up, we had to change things around. We still projected on this round wall, but this was the entrance to the space. There's the space itself where people would walk through, and then the event ended up being held upstairs. So in this area down here was where we would be doing the tracking and projection. So this is the final site. You see the round wall, and then that space where they would walk through, we'd track them, and then they would come up top. And here was our design. We only had 2 weeks, so there we go. Our final design ended up having like electronic music, but very just ambient, played across any device that was in the space that was on the page. Then there was spoken phrases. They were all inspirational quotes. You'll see some a little later. And they were all across all the different devices. There's a giant projection on the innovation wall. Projection, that's the logo kind of moving around on there. That's an Albert Einstein quote, apparently. We had about 117 quotes or something like that were just inspirational things for entrepreneurs, which we thought might be kind of useful. People dug that. So we basically projected something. We put the webpage out on people's devices, which made sound. They could interact with it, they could move it, and this little visualization changed. We would push phrases out to their device, and then every once in a while, the entire thing would flash, and individual devices would flash a certain color, and then we had a camera above that would color track it, color track the device, and then ID them in space, and then we could project on them as well, right? So you could have this phrases spread out across a number of different devices. That's basically the entryway, kind of a little forest of iPads. I think we had 10 arranged around different places. So this is during setup. This is one of the ways that it would work. When we send a specific color to a specific device, we could then track that color, ID it, and project on them. Cool. So the effectiveness was kind of interesting. Basically, everybody's had a website that played sounds, which played an audio file that displayed an inspirational quote. It's no big deal. But we tried to make it a little bit different so that it would respond when you moved it. It would synchronize with a projection, so what was on your device could actually be displayed for everyone, which is kind of an interesting effect. It spoke words on your device, as well as spoke words across your device to the next device, to the next device in the space, which made it kind of this weird, your personal device is now part of this bigger experience, which is where the web audio side of things came in. Yeah, kind of moving to technical details. Basically, we had a web server that provided all the web access or web views to any user, to the wall projection, to the floor projection, to this little forest of iPads, to the controller or for testing, so you could actually control this thing and test out different things, to a computer that was doing all audio synthesis for the entire space, not just the devices. And then a video tracking computer so that it could then send the video tracking location up to the projection, and then that would go to the floor projector and then get projected. So with lots of setup, lots of charging. This is the setup from above, basically a large short throw projector spread across the floor there. I think it's 6,000 lumens or so. The camera was attached to it, so it's from the same vantage point. A couple different computers. I think there's one more underneath the table. Each one kind of rendering a different aspect. Sorry. We did video tracking. I did it in jitter with the CV objects and tap tools. When a GoPro camera then just fed into Blackmagic capture card. So some of the views. If you see up to the right or left, you're right, there you go, are a couple different client images that would show up on people's phones and stuff. The one on the top is the actual display that was on the wall. And then this is the one that actually is generated for the floor. You can kind of see two different things here, that and that. So as one kind of radiates out. I'll show a very brief, we're going to skip that one. Let's do this one. A very brief clip here. Not quite sure how loud this is going to be, but we'll see. All right, so this is one device, one client, and then the floor, and you can see kind of the event happen, and that color changed. It got detected on the floor and then projected out. I think it happens here again. There's the green projected, that sort of thing. So this sound that's happening is actually just one device, and we had 10 iPads, a bunch of speakers around the space, and then anybody's in the space. And so it created this kind of shimmering effect kind of across the whole thing. Yeah. So we had a couple problems to solve. One of them, the big ones, was whether or not somebody was there. And with websites, it's hard to track when somebody leaves. So we basically pinged everybody, or had their web page ping back to say, I'm still here. And if they were still here, we could use them in the projection. We also had the iPad devices all out there so that even if nobody was on, you could still have the event occur. We had to split processing across lots of places. And then we did the four-screen coloring to color tracking to ID people, and then we could actually display stuff on them individually. We did end up getting the laser projector. We just couldn't use it at the event. So we tried it out with it. It was quite fun, and then swapped the projector in. Oh well. So anyway, back to the conclusions. Basically, it would have been great if we had more time. I suppose that's always that way. But it turned out pretty well as the way that it worked. It would have been better for us than our original plan was to integrate it into the conference website. So whenever you went to it to look at the program, that sort of thing, it was all kind of in the background, always going. And that also meant that if you were in the space, we could track you and target and do the event. But it was just too fast, or the event happened too quickly to be able to get it up there. Yeah, fog and lasers, that would have been great. And then the last thing was combining the video tracking with the web interaction was actually quite effective. And so I'm not really looking at doing this as another business event. I mean, maybe somebody really wanted it, pay for it, whatever. But artistically, I think there's some really interesting things you could do there that kind of border on that boundary between private personal devices and this corporate space. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much. Mm-hmm. We have questions. I'll start with one then. I was looking at your slide about the some of the lessons you learned from trying it out, what worked or what perhaps didn't. What was your sense of were you there? Did you see people working with it? And what did you infer from their experiences of it?
Yeah, it actually worked pretty well. I mean, basically people came in, almost everybody looked at the event thing and then looked at the iPads and stuff. About a quarter of them, maybe a little less than half, about a third. Anyway, actually pulled out their phones and tried things out. Everybody who tried it out ended up bringing people over to show them, right? That was kind of a weird but kind of fun thing. I do have to apologize. I do not have great documentation of this. I have pictures and then a couple of very, grainy cell phone pics. But if you want to see some of those, you can just ask me afterward. But yep, yeah, it went well. I think lasers would have been much better. Yeah.
Okay, other questions? All right, I will ask one more then, and then I'm going to check the slide just in case. Could you say what you have in mind for lasers in the future?
Yeah, actually, you can put a diffusion lens on the laser so that it won't hurt people's eyes, and then get permission to shoot it into crowds and that sort of thing. So in this case, basically actually shooting the device and then having the device make these crackling sounds and explosions and that sort of stuff. Right. So, but the ability to bring your device into the space and really connect it is quite visceral. So I think that's the thing. As it was kind of like a projection kind of out around you as the person who had the sounds that were going on.
Yes, there's one there. Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. I just want to ask, you were tracking the people from above with the camera and according to the color they had on the screen, no?
Yep.
But like, if you have the camera on top of the people, like they are in the middle, they can also get in the middle. Like, could you actually access the screen at all times, or how do you get around that?
So in the original spot that we actually had the camera out in this very high balcony, and it was quite nice because no matter where we were vertical enough to catch it. In this space, it was only one balcony up and then kind of up on a pole. So there was a way to include it if you were looking. It was kind of convenient, actually. You'd have to be looking outside to block it. But if you were on the side or towards us, we caught everything on that side. So it worked out okay, but higher would have been better.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Jesse, one more time.